Welcome everybody watching us on Facebook who are on one of the 6 sites of the USA Today Network, Florida. Welcome to Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum, who is the Democratic nominee for governor of Florida. We thank him for taking the time from his very busy schedule, and even on Halloween, to share his vision of Florida with us all. My name is Randy Atwood. I'm the platform for the Tallahassee Democrat, and our time is limited, so I'm just going to say a few. Jump right into the questions. Streamed live on all 6 websites and all 6 Facebook pages. We've got representatives from 5 of our 6 Florida papers here. The Naples Daily News is out covering a Donald Trump rally right now. So send the questions and we'll ask for them. And we'll try and take an audience question or two. So if you're watching on Facebook, please type your questions in the comments section. And of course, Mayor Gillum, the more succinct your answers are, more questions we'll be able to get to. And we'll make sure and leave you some time at the end to speak directly to voters. We do want to make sure everybody knew that we invited Mayor Gillum's opponent, Representative Ron DeSantis, to a forum just like this. He accepted but canceled at the last moment, so unfortunately we do not have a corresponding video to watch of him. But let's just jump right in. Let me introduce Steve Sanders from the Treasure Coast newspapers to ask the first question.
Thanks for being here, Mayor Gillum. This month, as you may have heard, the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir was approved by Congress and also signed into law by President Trump. Now it needs consistent funding to get built to help alleviate the damaging discharges to the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee rivers. What would you do if elected as governor to ensure this consistent funding and work with President Trump and Congress to make sure it happens?
Yeah, so one, it's high time that we saw that funding come through. That's an important element to making sure that we, in my opinion, are as environmentally responsible as we can be. Under this previous 8 years under the Scott administration, and quite frankly, going back as far as when CERP was approved, over a decade, going up to 2 ago, none of those projects have been completed yet. Those were projects that were all reached as part of a compromise, if you will, between environmentalists, the industry, developers. A lot of folks were at the table that signed on and agreed to that. Florida needs to step up to the table and make sure that we fund these projects. Every year that we neglect funding is the worse that the problem gets and the more expensive it gets. I'm committed as part of our legislative and budget requests to prioritizing it. Know that we've got to be much better environmental stewards, and part of that obviously is completing these projects, but I would also add to it, part of it is also dealing with some of the growth happening north of Lake Okeechobee. It's, in my opinion, probably the best solution that we treat these nitrates and the runoffs on site. Find itself flowing down into Lake O and obviously out into the estuaries and create kind of toxic algae blooms that we see happening on the east and the west coast of the state. So a lot of work to be done, and the simple answer would be we would be committed to, again, returning to that negotiated agreement, probably with some modifications and updates, and working to see those efforts funded.
Thanks for your concise answer. Can I just ask a brief follow-up? Do you have any concerns about being of a different party than the president in terms of effectiveness in getting federal funding?
I don't. I mean, the job of the president is to tend to the needs of all the people in the United States, regardless of who party affiliation they may have or they may hold. This isn't Russia. It's the United States of America. Florida is the 3rd largest state in America, and we've got to make it a priority. We've got to work through the administrative arm of the government. We've got to work with our champions, United States Congress, the House and the Senate. And together, a team effort is what's going to be required. My party affiliation or my relationship with the president, quite frankly, in my opinion, should have little to no bearing on that. And I would, just give as an example the fact that, Governor Rick Scott and I have not always agreed on things. We've had our differences. But where it comes to working on behalf of our mutual constituencies, we found opportunities in the space where we.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Isadora Rangel from Florida Today.
Hi. I have a question about your education proposal. You propose a corporate tax increase to raise starting teacher salaries to $50,000. Republicans will likely continue to control both chambers of the legislature, and they say your plan to raise taxes is a non-starter. And also, voters will decide whether to pass Amendment 5 this year, which would require a 2/3 of the legislature to raise any taxes. These facts seem to make it very hard for you to enact new taxes. Given this scenario, come up with a backup plan to raise teacher salaries and education funding.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we need to look to the lottery where possible. Obviously, we can't draw any conclusions yet about what will happen in the Florida legislature. There are some challenges with the House, and I think largely due to the result of redistricting, which has not created the greatest opportunities for competitive races. But my job is going to be to have to find cooperation where possible in the House and in the Senate to our agenda. But I want to be clear about what the nature is of these taxes. I know my opponent has talked a lot about sort of stoking fears that I plan to implement a state income tax, of which obviously the governor cannot do. Florida Constitution prevents that from a governor being able to do that, nor is my intention. The corporate tax rate in the state of Florida, only 3% of corporations pay the corporate tax rate. 97% of businesses in our state don't pay the corporate tax rate. The 3% of the wealthiest corporations that exist in the state of Florida, the same 3%, that under the tax realignment under the President Trump and the Republicans, walked with $6.3 billion. Promise that working people would get a raise. That hadn't happened. Under the promise that more companies would refuse moving their businesses out of the United States, yet we have seen repeated announcements of jobs being shut down here in the U.S. and moved overseas. What we've simply said is that for that 3%, that wealthiest 3% of corporations, and that $0.3 billion that they're walking away with, that they can keep $5.3 billion. We want $1 billion of that to come into the state to pay our teachers what they're worth, assist with training and also early childhood education. I'm looking forward to working with the legislature. Obviously, they have tools in their toolbox, and the governor's office has tools in that toolbox to help to corral cooperation between the various bodies. But I would also submit that you don't have to be of the same party and to get the legislature to cooperate. You'll recall that Governor Scott had many challenges. Controlling party who shared his identity when it came to his budget and other priorities. I think that what we're going to be looking for are places where we can work together, and where we can't, we have to use the instrumentalities of our office to help compel cooperation. Thank you.
Tom Hayden now from the Fort Myers News Press.
Hi, Mayor. Welcome. I'm going to take you back to water for a second. Food trucks are showing up on our Southwest Florida beaches to feed employees who can't make enough money because the businesses where they were employed are crippled economically because of the algae and the red tide outbreaks. What specific ways are there to help these people get through this really difficult time?
Yeah, I was just in your area yesterday.
Yeah.
With a good number of your residents who expressed similar concern about the impacts of these toxic algae blooms and what that's done to the tourism economy.
Right.
Done obviously to restaurants and hoteliers and you name it. I think the state really does consider what its responsibility is, what's were made or missed on behalf of the government that led to the crisis that we're seeing. I do think there is some complicity by our government. The laxing of environmental protections, this so-called idea of best practices, asking big ag to submit best practices without any teeth for follow-up to compel them to actually complete those projects or even have a financial plan to work initiating those projects. We'd be able to establish a role and a responsibility of the government in creating this problem. Yeah, I would be open to are the kind of aid packages that might come into play, the disaster that, in my opinion, could have been wholly prevented, that I think this administration bears some responsibility for. So I would be open to working with the legislature on what that looks like.
Sure. Thank you.
Great. Our next question comes here from Jennifer Portman of Tallahassee Democrat.
Yes.
Just one FBI question.
I know. And this is a specific one that I think could bring a little bit more clarity to what maybe the undercover officers were doing here, and also could speak kind of to their decision making. We spoke to you a year ago or so, last December, about Mike Miller. You said your communication with him came to a decisive conclusion. Uncomfortable about one occurrence that took place. You described it as an uncomfortable situation that prompted you to cut off contact with Miller that you never heard from him. What was that?
Yeah, I had met with Mike and has asked him for his support of me. This was as I was beginning my run for governor. We were sitting down at a local restaurant, and he responded to me that, you know, while he liked me and wanted to be helpful, wanted to be supportive, their interest was in local government. And I said, you know, okay. And then he said, you know, if we could count on your help here at the local level, you know, we'd be interested in sort of helping. And at that point, I said to him, you know, I like you, you like me. We're friends, but I assume you're supporting me to be of me in exchange for something, but of me. And that was my way of sort of putting a hard line in place. Like, to me, it felt like that crossed into a transaction, right? That if he was going to support my run for governor, that would mean that he was looking for me to then help him. There was nothing specific. I have to say that. And I think I indicated that in previous conversations with folks here at the Democrat, that anything very clearly expressed, will you vote this way? Will you do this? Will you do that? That never happened over the course of our friendship with Mike. But this encounter in particular, because I was making an ask for help in my race for governor, it seemed to me he responded to in that way, in a way that felt transactional. That was kind of the hit for me. And I never followed up, and truth be told, he never followed up with me. And so that was the end of it. That was the conclusive end of that relationship.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
I've got a Facebook question. I've been watching the various feeds, and there's a lot of people asking questions. I think that the question I'm seeing the most, I'm going to paraphrase for everyone who asked it, is, can you reassure us, the Facebook audience, that you're an honest man? That's what I see the most of. How do we trust you? How can we be reassured that you're honest?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's evidence that I'm not honest. I realize that in the text messages that were made public of late, there was an acknowledgement of me to Adam that the Hamilton tickets had been secured. And just to put in perspective for people, I secured concert tickets for friends and friends of mine because we want to sit together, you won't contact, and then people have then paid their share back to me, either in cash, check, or in some kind of cash app or whatever. Acknowledgement of me saying, that's great. The confirmation, as far as I was concerned, was that, all right, we're not going to show up and to see the show. So I was acknowledging that. Under no circumstance did I assume that to mean that someone had purchased, that Mike or Adam had purchased my ticket. I expressed relationship and conversation with my brother, asking him to take care of it for me, because quite frankly, I was there juggling work. You could probably see from the text exchanges that they weren't even clear that I was going to be able to join them at the event, in large part because they knew I was in the for work. I think what I would ask people to do is to blow back. I realize that in the context of that Mike Miller was an FBI agent, everything is only seen through the lens of an FBI agent and me. Well, my perspective at the time was this is someone who for months, year, has sort of been in our area, seen him, joined my workout group, exercise with us. And I felt that there was a real relationship there. and I have relationships with a lot of people. What I think I'm most upset about this whole conversation is to assume that because you know someone or because you have a friendship, that inures to you making unethical decisions in their benefit. The point around the Edison restaurant, my vote on that was by no means a result of a friendship. In fact, it was a pretty compelling vote by the entirety of the commission. And I was part of the majority, the overwhelming majority of the council in that case. My integrity has always been intact. Never once have I always demonstrated, I think, the highest level of retrospect, I would have to say, as I said in this case. In retrospect, I would have asked more questions. I would have gone deeper. I took things at their value and the way that it was being presented to me. And I have to tell you, given the last almost 2 years of my life in this, you won't find me making that kind of mistake again. You won't find that kind of, I think, trusting relationship that I had found before. But I think what people should understand is I entered politics in an official way when I was 23 years old. I've literally grown up in this space. And in so doing, you learn some things, you grow, you evolve, but largely my innocence around how I think this process is supposed to work has really always been intact. And only since this incident did it start to shake that a little bit. And the truth is that you can't always trust what's right in front of you. And you got to guard yourself in this life and in this world, because just because someone's around you doesn't mean they have good intentions for you. I've got to take responsibility for my part of that. But I would want people to know that there's no malice or ill intent or intent to corrupt or intent to undermine anybody in that process. And if you look over the arc of my service, you won't find a single example of my service that would substantiate me being malicious or intentionally deceptive in any of my service. That's been the most hurtful thing to me and to my family, is that's not who I am, and that's not how I've lived my life. And to have it wrapped in this way in this political season has been rough. But I can be clear that you won't find me putting myself in that situation again.
Thank you for that answer. We'll move away now to something else. Jennifer's going to ask a question from the Naples Daily News. Years ago, in the current administration, the FCAT was replaced with the FSA.
Yes.
Are you satisfied with the FSA for student testing, or do you have specific ideas in mind for them?
Yeah, I am not satisfied. I think the Massachusetts model, and I sat on an education foundation board in Cambridge, the Shaw Foundation for Public Education. And our whole frame was to approach public education from a supports-based frame. The idea that because, so a couple of things, we know that 90% of brain development over the course of human life takes place between the ages of 0 and 5. That in the state, nearly 40% of our kids are showing up at kindergarten not ready to learn. Same percentage not on grade level reading by the time they get to 3rd grade. The most important input, the most important impact we can have on a child's education is actually much earlier than the point that we begin real strenuous engagement. And at the point that we begin that kind of strenuous engagement, our children who start behind almost always stay behind. And so if we're serious about making sure that our kids get the greatest opportunity at academic success, then we gotta be front loading the supports where they get to the point where we start penalizing teachers for not achieving yearly progress with a group of students that have their fingerprint on before they got to their classroom. It's incentive for some of our most experienced teachers, most experienced teaching professionals from into the toughest, roughest environments where, frankly, the more skilled teachers' expertise is necessary, it's needed. Be in favor of an academic support, yes, with accountability, but an academic support-based frame where we figure out what are the needs in the system. How do we best then spend and fund to the needs, ensuring that our teachers have proper training, proper accountability, of course. This regime of high-stakes testing, and there are increasing research that are showing up that these tests are telling us what our kids know, but how well they take a test. If we know that, then there's no way that we should be resting on these tests as being the sole indicator of how well our children and our schools are doing. I think there are cumulative ways in which you can assess a child's progress and a school's progress. I also think that there are much more effective mechanisms to incentivizing teachers, particularly your most well-trained, most tenured teachers, for into our toughest environments. But in large part, we're giving them the hardest mission, the hardest task where it's hardest to make the corrective actions. It's about making sure that our kids arrive ready to learn. We've got to bookend on the front end support so that when our kids enter kindergarten, they enter ready to learn. It's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate around early childhood education, and why as mayor, I started our Family First initiative trying to put a premium focus on early childhood education and early childhood development.
And next question is from Andy Marlette from Pensacola News Journal.
Mayor, good to see you.
Good to see you. I was in your home today.
We saw you live this morning, so it's kind of funny to be talking online. Here in the Panhandle, we've struggled a lot with beach access issues in recent years. So in light of the state law that earlier this year hurt beach access in Walton County, if you were to be elected, would you commit now to supporting local customary use policies?
Absolutely.
Without exceptions, even in areas where private property lines may be drawn to the water?
Absolutely. First of all, that's our water. That's shared water. It's shared tax dollars that go to help fortify those beaches and beach erosion. Those are private dollars that go toward that benefit, which, in my opinion, is a disproportionate advantage for many of those homeowners who have, nice real estate along the coastal waterways, but it's the Florida taxpayers that are affording them that opportunity. I started an organization called the Campaign to Defend Local Solutions because of these kind of preemption efforts that we saw by the Florida legislature taking away local control and supplanting their judgment in the place of local governments who are most accountable to the people at the local level. I would absolutely support repeal of that kind of legislation, not just there, quite frankly, on a whole range of issues where local government have been superseded, their judgment has been superseded by the Florida legislature, who have acted on behalf of big interests, and in my opinion, not in the interest of the everyday people of this state.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andy. Okay, one more question here from Jennifer.
Okay, we have 5 more minutes. And I'll ask this really quickly, but I do want to give you time, so answer this briefly so you have time to, talk to voters specifically. This has been such a blistering, bitterly divided campaign that we live in. This so polarized right now. You become governor. Is there a specific issue that you think can unite the state, is it education specifically? Is there something that everyone can support?
Well, I'll tell you, I actually have found real energy around the state around Medicaid expansion. And this has been in all parts of our state. And I think part of that is that people are waking up to the fact that healthcare is the most ballooning part of the state's budget. You have folks around the state of Florida who are literally terrified of getting sick. They feel that they may be one illness or bankruptcy, illness away from bankruptcy. And in the state of Florida, our failure to expand access to Medicaid expansion has cost us about $6 billion at the federal level of resources that should have come into the state of Florida that got distributed to other states because we had a philosophical disagreement around healthcare. Now, while the Republican leadership right now in the House, because you'll recall that the Senate passed Medicaid expansion 39-1 under Republican leadership, that tells me that there was real synergy there. And then the politics of it got in the way, the Obama, that kind of thing. And this is why I think it's important. It's not just for the 800,000 folks who don't have access to insurance, the 1 in 5 Floridians who are right now going to emergency rooms to access health care. It also matters for those of us who do have insurance. Those of us who got employee-based insurance, small businesses who cannot insure their employees fully because it's too expensive and they can't offer that coverage. When we're seeing our premiums increase year over year, that's by and large due to the fact that we're paying the healthcare system in emergency rooms, which again is the most expensive and least efficient form of care. So if we have to pay one way or another, it's been our argument that we ought to pay on the front end, where folks get access to a doctor, have a relationship, are able to make corrective action, so that the time that we see them in emergency rooms, when they're at their most acute level of illness and the most expensive level, that we're able to prevent that on the front end. I think it's smart for us to do, not only for the benefit of bringing all those resources, expanding access, but also the potential for lowering costs. And I don't have any pride of authorship over what we call it. If Speaker Oliva wants to call it Oliva Care, I'm willing to work with him to make that happen. If we got to call this healthcare by another name, I'm happy to make that happen. For me, it is most important that we expand access, get more people covered, lower costs. And I've talked to insurance folks in this state. I've talked to hospital folks in this state. And the funny thing is that there is some universal agreement across the board. Now, the devil is in the details, so we're going to have to work it out. But the fact that you've got interests that have been traditionally Republican that are talking to me and saying that this is their number one priority too, not matched with everyday people who are raising this as a concern, that may be an area where we may be able to drive some consensus.
Thank you.
Cooperation.
You've got a couple, all you, it is 6:07.
All right. Well, I will not take too long because I know everybody's got trick or treat, and I haven't seen my kids in 8 days. So I'm looking forward to trick or treating with them tonight. I would simply say, first of all, to you all, thank you for the opportunity. I have a tremendous amount of respect for your profession and the work that you do. And I think that it's important to have honest brokers and honest arbiters of what happens in this political space, especially given the heated rhetoric and dynamic that exists right now, where we got bombs being mailed into people's homes because of political disagreements, where 11 families are burying loved ones this week in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, due to the politicizing and the anti-Semitism that has been on the rise targeted against people based off of their religion, the color of their skin, and now increasing with their political differences. It's my hope to be able to provide, I think, a little bit of a ray of light, that the politics of division are not going to win out in this race. That we've tried every single day to give voters something to go out there and vote for and not just against. Now, that doesn't mean that Mr. DeSantis will have a heap of people who are supporting him and are fiercely behind him. And I don't have the same. I think we do. But it's my job to try to provide, I think, some healing when we win this race, which is partly why I have been campaigning in some of the deepest red areas of this state. It's not because I'm expecting that I'm going to win those areas. I'm there because I want them to know that I want to be their governor too. And I don't want them to view me through some caricature or a negative ad and not have the ability to make a judgment about what it is that I want to do to improve not just my life and my children's life, but everybody's, the kids whose names I can't call, the faces I can't recognize. And so I'm out here competing in the final stretch of this race in areas that I am pretty sure that I won't walk away with the majority. But it's worth doing it because when we win this race, as I said before, I want to be their governor too. I love this state. I'm extremely proud of the opportunity to carry the banner as the Democratic nominee. But once we win this race, the banner I carry is the banner for Florida. It's my job to do what's in the best interest of the people of the state of Florida. And I hope that voters will give me the chance to serve them, to be their best representative voice and their best advocate for the next 4 years. So I want to again thank you all for the opportunity. I'm sorry that your viewers won't get to hear from my opponent, Mr. DeSantis. I think it would have been a worthwhile exchange. But I'm proud to have had the opportunity to talk with you, and am looking forward to seeing you over the next 4 years. Thank you all.
Thank you again.